You're listening to the AFTERBUZZ TV Network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Dean. Johnson.
From the AFTERBUZZ Studios in Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and Bing.com, and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies, this is AFTERBUZZ TV's Mad Men After Show. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. If you'd like to buzz in on tonight's show, you can buzz us at 424-256-1729. That's 424-256-1729. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show. It's AFTERBUZZ TV's Mad Men After Show.
Mad Men, Mad Men, Mad Men, Mad Men, Mad Men, Mad Men.
Ooh, Bing is for doing.
Yeah.
We are doing the Mad Men AFTERBUZZ After Show. I'm Joe Braswell. I'm here, joined by Matt Lieberman.
Yes, yes. I'm so happy to be back. I missed last week, but what a great episode this was.
Good to have you back. And I'm also joined again, back to back,
Absolutely.
by my man Alex Salem.
Lovely to see you, Joe. Lovely to see you, Matt.
Thank you. Lovely to see you too, sir.
Absolutely.
Joe Sanfelippo is spending some time with his family on Mother's Day.
All
We
right.
don't begrudge him of that. And I believe Catherine is still in London doing some Star Trek
Being
stuff.
delightful, doing Star Trek stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Catherine, we miss you.
So we miss you both. But so let's get into this. Well, we have kind of a new set a little bit. This is
Yeah.
like a AFTERBUZZ After Dark. This is like very
AFTERBuzz TV.
I love
Nights.
it is. It's very much.
Wow.
Cities, I got a
TV.
cityscape. I love it.
Nights.
Nights.
Yeah.
So let's just jump into this. This was another great episode. Last week's
yeah.
episode was
Was a
freaking
knockout.
tastic,
Action
and then
packed.
followed up by this episode. So much for those who are saying nothing's happening on Mad Men. I don't know. I feel like we're really ramping it up in a major way.
There's
yeah.
a lot going on.
There's a lot going on, and we're still relatively early on in the season. This was the 6th episode, the 5th week of it airing, so we still have 7 whole episodes to go. We're not even halfway through.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. We've wound up so much with these characters, and now we're kind of like getting into them and laying them out. But I want to first say that this is a John Slattery directed episode.
Yes.
You know, Joe Sanfelippo last week gushed and too bad he's not here because he would just gush more about, I love Slattery. I just love me some Slattery.
Some Roger Sterling.
Some Roger Sterling. That's
That's
my bad Flippo imitation.
That's a great flip-o.
No,
and,
It was really good.
I'm really happy about it.
But Slattery directed this episode and did a fantastic job.
He's directed about, I think, 2 or 3 before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's always lovely to see. Like, there was a bit of Sterling, but it was pretty much focused on the other characters for the rest of it.
And the Sterling we got was some good Sterling.
Well, he directed the
Classic Sterling.
He directed the season opener. Am I correct?
I don't know.
We'll double check.
Phil?
Yeah.
Not this season.
Not this
Not this
season.
season.
No, okay.
All right.
So, but we did get, like, we talked a lot about how our girl Jen directed last week.
Right.
She's the kind of the ringer of the Mad Men directors.
Nice subtleties,
Yes.
nice little like bits we were
And
mentioning.
her episodes moved. They're music driven, and they were really great. I felt like this one was equally as good. I mean, just in terms of the way it moved. But what I liked about this one is, well, I talked about this in the day, but it was a gigantic first act.
Yeah.
Like, so much happened before the act break. In that first 15 minutes, we had so many characters and so many things, and like, you know, Don, you know, with the breakup with Sylvia, we had, and then down the elevator we had the merger. We had all these characters mushing together in a merger.
Benson,
Benson, like I said,
yeah, last week, Joe, you mentioned we were talking about how on earth is everybody else at SCDP gonna react to news of this merger, and we just paved right past that. And by the first act, we were getting into the little nitty gritty of redundancies and people getting
we
like, power
bulldozed our
struggles.
way through it, you know, and
Bert
Peterson gone again.
Again, a second firing of Bert Peterson.
That was
who the only times we've seen him is when he was getting fired.
He's a great guy, and again, Sterling handled that with all the tact and all the humor that we wanted Sterling to handle that with.
He got way too much joy out of that.
So many
was awesome.
power plays in this episode. Like, even when he had Bert sit down on that like fainting couch fancy thing that he didn't understand. He was power playing Bert. We had Don and Shaw power playing each other. Don power playing Sylvia.
Well, don't forget that's the ultimate power play, the 50 Shades of Don, if we will.
We
talked about that.
50 Shades of Grey, the Gray Shirt Mafia
that's
here representing
Gray Shirt
tonight.
Mafia represent for those of you watching us on YouTube for the Gray Shirt
planned
Mafia.
it.
But for those of you watching us on iTunes, we want to thank you very much for listening to us and downloading us on iTunes. We're hanging in there in the top 3 to 5 shows here on AfterBuzz. We appreciate you and your comments, and you continue to download. And please comment away. We need your feedback. Rate us, give us 5s. Don't give us 5s. We like it better if you give us 5s. Excuse me. And
but I want an honest 5. Yeah. I want a deserved 5.
Not Joe Sanfelippo begging for 5s like he always does.
Yeah.
I just want participation.
Yes, exactly. We want you to participate. So, but thank you.
I want to say this real fast.
Yeah.
Since it's John Slattery directed episode.
Sure.
It's interesting to me whenever an actor does. I've been thinking about this and how to form it. Right. John Hamm's directed a few episodes.
Yeah.
Of John Slattery, and to me, what's interesting about that is that it keeps the cast close. Because they don't always get to interact with each other on set.
Oh, yeah.
But seeing them at the premiere party all together and the way they were joking and seeing, I saw in particular Elizabeth Moss with John Slattery, and, she was kind of hungry, and he was like, here, take my plate.
Aww.
And, kind of still joking. He's very jovial.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think to a degree it's a strategy on Matthew Weiner's part to have people that want to step up and direct, because it does keep it very close knit.
Especially with a giant cast like that. It was a giant cast, and so people aren't always shooting on the same days.
Yeah.
People aren't always, but there is sort of a connectivity that needs to be there, especially when they have this office dynamic.
And I think it adds a certain snap to the performances, because people really just want to kick butt for a fellow colleague who's taken that stab.
Who knows what their process is like, who's approaching it from a new perspective.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then so to that point, just, we talked about the density of this episode. I mean, it's starting this world, this world quietly. Matthew Weiner's created this giant world full of a lot of characters, and there's a lot of talk about Game of Thrones and how sort of big that world is, and there's like 1,000 characters, and it's hard to follow. But then you're kind of
18 storylines.
Yeah, and Mad Men never really felt like that. But you kind of look up, and we have all these characters, but each of these characters has an expanded storyline. So then you add in the whole CGC element. And we've smashed together. We've got a lot going on, and I think it's handled very well, especially in that first act.
In that first act, we got through not only everything going on at the office, but we set up Don and Pete's separate outside of the office storylines, and got like a full sequence into that before the first act break.
Well, let's jump into Pete. Let's jump into this episode here. Pete's a good place to start. We can get back to the merger and some other things later, but. Pete really has, over these last 3 episodes, Pete's been a little edgy.
He's been going through hell.
He's been a little edgy.
Yeah.
Well, he's got going through this divorce, and he's going through these other things, and he's still angry Don. And
Roger's stepping up, and he doesn't have that card to play anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's run down the list just very shortly. So, he cheats on his wife, trying to be the Don Draper, gets caught. He loses his wife. Mm-hmm. He then he sort of loses. Is still being out Drapered by Draper in the office.
Yeah.
He's out Sterling by Sterling.
He loses Clearasil. Through a freak coincidence.
He loses Vicks.
He loses Vicks chemical as well. And now in this, then he loses his $1 million offering, because as the company is about to go public, that was ruined. That was his baby.
And now he loses his freedom, as he now has to take care of his addled mother.
Right. And he's also feeling the squeeze of the CGC coming in, which he was not a part of this.
Right.
It's nothing that he was a part of.
Yeah, he didn't get to be a part of that decision. But is he really in danger? I mean, he's a partner.
Right. But I think the net result is that he's already sort of feeling the pressure from, even though they're not directly, he's not a creative, from Draper, and then it's from Sterling, and then it's sort of like he's like the little brother who's screaming to be like, what about me? What about me? And now it's like his voice is getting smaller and smaller, because you get Harry Hamlin coming in. He came into the
meeting. He didn't have a chair.
Well, I'll get to that in a second.
We have no idea. We have no idea what Pete's reaction to the news was. We have no idea what Pete's dynamic with Chaw is when there's just a room with just Pete and Chaw. Yeah. There's a lot more to develop in later scenes where I feel like there's a lot of backlash is going to come from Pete at some of these characters.
I mean,
we don't know how much stake he has as a partner in the new company. We don't know how they're doing that.
We don't know if they're still going to go public or if that's still as a bigger offer.
We don't even know what the company's called.
We don't. A big long acronym. I'll tell you what. SDCPCGC.
Well, you know what? For me, the funny part it's going to be seeing Pete later on because you guys have been saying, kind of debating whether or not he's grown. Remember in past seasons, I mean, he had a fist fight in the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And is he going to revert to that sort of Pete? Because I mean, that's. You talk about childish. There's nothing more childish than a fist fight.
Sure. He's known for his tantrums.
Yeah,
Pete has a good tantrum every episode.
Last week he was so mad he fell down the stairs.
Yes, he did. He did. And his hairline. That hairline is getting.
It's getting thin.
That's actually not like he's not the only one whose hair is starting to get messed up as things get more tense.
He's getting a little stressed. But so let me ask you. So we see him have what seemed to be the beginnings of this breakdown, and then. Only exacerbated by his mother, which we find out has some sort of dementia / Alzheimer's or something. Like what let's talk about Pete, like what he's going through and where he's at.
Well, it's rough. Not only is he being squeezed out at work, he's desperate. He's desperate to keep his position, and that's all he has really. He's lost everything else through his own mistakes.
When we met him, he was totally focused on climbing the corporate ladder and the social ladder, and his position was everything. Coming from a wealthy family, getting married to Trudy right when we met him, that was his part of his status. He's not only lost that, but in a sense, he's taking care of his mom. It's like he's regressed entirely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, do we think? I mean, I feel, someone mentioned that the vices seems to be turning up on Pete, and this may be taking its toll on him in a way that we may see
in a Lane Price-esque fashion. Perhaps?
Yeah,
I mean they've done it.
Where do we think this is going? Not to jump into this in a prediction, but where do you guys think this is going with Pete? I'm not going to step on, a prediction, but
when a character or anybody is pressed up against a wall, you have two options: you grow or you get desperate.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Lane. He could have let go of some of his pride and asked for help, or you get desperate and you make a big mistake.
Right.
And I think that Pete is not one to grow. I would love to see him surprise us and grow as a person and see some newfound wealth of humanity that we've yet to see. But I think he's going to get desperate and he's going to do something sloppy that could very well endanger himself and everyone at the company.
When he gets a little bit of momentum going, he's usually messed it up some way by getting too greedy, too ambitious, and stepping on everybody else by like trying to make room for himself.
Right.
So we haven't had anything to really establish that someone's going to reach out and help him, that he's going to accept help, that he is going to grow. And when he has gotten something going for him, he messes it up because he's
right.
Well, remember when we met him, he was very much set up as a villain in season 1.
I was just going to bring that up. I feel like that he was in season 1 was actually the villain. I mean, all the stuff with Peggy, how he treated her, he'd like
trying to undermine Don and expose him.
In season 1 and 2, like he was the villain. But then we kind of
the Dick Whitman play,
the
where
Dick
he found
Whitman
out,
play,
yeah.
And then like he's always had this sort of like robot Asperger sort of like I don't know, like I don't
right,
he's
slightly sociopathic.
Yeah, this thing. But now what's happened to Pete is he's sort of leveled out, right? I mean, like, we're not rooting for him, but we're not like
he's
we don't
actively
hate him
rooting against him.
He's a bit more tolerable.
We're not rooting for him, but we're not actively rooting against him. But this episode, we see him treat his mother in a way that makes him back, in my opinion, that kind of gives him back in the villain status.
He takes advantage of her dementia to make things easier for himself.
Right.
I talk a lot about Bob Benson. We're gonna get into Benson Watch a bit later because he had a big episode this week, so I'm super excited.
Big Benson.
Shout out to Bob Benson.
Yeah, but we saw in the last episode that Pete considers Bob a friend, and he took him with him to the whorehouse. I think that he's going to give Bob a little too much power, and then Bob is going to make a play.
You're so anti-Benson.
I'm so anti-Benson.
Well, it's
for a reason.
Benson or Campbell. I mean, like, this is the question,
Well, so we get a little bit of insight into Pete Campbell's past and or life, because through his poor, dementia-ridden mother, she talks about just a lot about the father. The father.
Yeah.
You know, so you get a little. You know, maybe the father visited prostitutes. Maybe the father was always not around as much, and then through that, then you have the mother who is sort of a little overbearing, but also going through Alzheimer's. So what does this say about who Pete is? Does this maybe explain why he's such a robot? I don't know.
Absolutely, I don't know about the robot, but certainly the social climber. He's always been one where we've either. Many people say they've absolutely hated to watch him from the beginning.
Yes,
but we've been
I'm one of them.
But we've been fascinated by him as a character. You can't look away from him. It's like you really want him to figure it out. You really want to help him, but then he just does that one little thing that messes it up.
Here's what I think: when you come from a family of wealth, there's expectations.
Right.
You know, judging from his mother's demeanor and from Pete himself, he never really garnered much respect from them, no matter what he did. In many ways, I think he never grew up because he resented his parents.
Right.
You know, he resented their expectations for him that he felt he could never fill. He never really felt that he had the love that he deserved. So he became a little snotty prick.
Right.
And now, you know, he's halfway through his career. His hair's thinning. He's started a family. He's lost the family.
Right.
And now the career might not even happen.
He has nothing but complain to Harry Crane.
Right.
You know.
There was a moment there where I felt like, you know, I did a little more than just tolerate Pete. I started to actually like Pete.
Yeah.
At one point, and then at the beginning of this season, I must say I was a little during the flood episode when he, you know, kind of came out as this gigantic. Well, we knew he was a liberal because he comes from a liberal. A Democratic family.
Where he's arguing with Harry in the middle
of
the
he
office.
kind of came out for sort of on the, you know, calling Harry a racist and sort of being super progressive. I like, oh, there you go, Pete. You've got a heart.
Oh yeah, we all were like, you the man, Pete.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it.
I could not believe it. But
is that the seed? Is that the seed of how he might actually
of change?
The seed of change
well,
that might come to.
That's what I thought until I see him being a complete. What is that?
It's Matt's singing corner.
The seed of change.
That's a nice tone.
Yeah.
Living
in the night.
Okay. All right. I love it.
You until you saw him interacting with his mother in this episode. You were hopeful.
And now I'm back. He's actually just.
I feel like he's always had that relationship with his mother, and
we just don't see it.
Yeah, we haven't seen her since the second season when we met his father.
Right.
Or maybe it was mid first season.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so I don't know. So Pete's Pete, but Pete didn't handle the any aspects of the merger well, especially when he came into the conference room and didn't have a chair. I thought that the merger, I mean, the beginnings of how this was going to sit out sort of played out in that conference room in a way that was just one of the better things I've seen on the show.
This was a brilliant shout out to John Slattery for the direction of this scene.
The staging of that set piece was amazing.
We're not talking about people hashing out the discussions of how the companies are going to be structured and who's reacting to the news of the merger. What we're seeing is the evidence of that in the show don't tell kind of fashion of this scene where Ted gets up, of course, to let
his secretary sit.
Well, listen,
Pete's whining,
and more than that, like I've been, I've been yammering on, I should say, about how I love the workplace stuff more than I do the drama stuff, and man, this was exactly what I wanted to see because you've got, and I talked about last week a little bit. You have, CGC is sort of a weird, bizarro mirror image of Sterling Cooper, Draper, Price. You have, Sterling and Cutler, kind of like they're like bizarro. So
what? We're admin. What do you want? All right, we'll take care of that.
We're
two sides of the same wacky.
We invited ourselves on the flight to Paris.
Exactly. Silver-haired coin.
Exactly. Two sides of the same martini. A martini on one side and a silver-haired guy on the other side. I don't know what that coin is. And then, of course, you have the obvious, the Chaw, the creative, the Chaw versus Draper.
Draper Chaw.
Right, which is really great. But then you see it expand a little bit when you get like little small things like that confrontation with Joan and Chaw's girl, which is sort of like, I handle this. Joan's like, no, I handle this. Well, Chaw wouldn't want this. Well, Chaw is not, It was
very much like when the British came into Sterling Cooper in the big season 3 premiere, and there was Lane's right-hand man dude who was like, he was like a secretary, but
he was a toady.
He was a toady.
He was a toady. But here's the thing: it's the flip side of that, where the remaining CGCites are feeling the squeeze from the SCDP people, and those who aren't in the know at SCDP are the ones who are panicking.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we see a little bit of that in the outside when Joan is sort of directing traffic, and the CGC people were like, "Are we all gonna? All the creatives gonna be in one room? Is this like how you do it over here?" And you know,
there's no room. Well,
exactly.
there will be in a little bit.
But the most interesting thing. So let's get back to the conference room. So the real showdown now there was obviously between Cha and Draper. Sort of not. You know, there was a showdown done with very little words on either part. Like, you know, everything was it's just a complete contrast of styles and people. You saw. I mean, the first thing Cha did was use groovy. You know,
yeah,
he dropped a groovy.
We just wanted to free associate for a minute here.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Stan to be like, "Hell yeah, man! Let me bust out that Project K."
Where's the Project K? Broom closet right this way.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but Cha has this whole relaxed sort of like very current 60s 1968 demeanor to him in his dress and the way he carries himself, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds groovy," and Don's like,
And then Don's not
You
there
know.
for 40 minutes.
yeah,
Exactly.
and then when Pete comes in, it's like, "Well, I need a chair," and of course we talked about it, but you know, Cha does a great move like, "You know what? I'm a creative man. I don't need a chair.
Yeah.
I'll give the chair to my secretary, and I'll
He scooted himself up.
I
on
can
the
sit
desk.
on the desk, man. You know, like you never see Don Draper pop up on a desk. You know, just kind of kicking around, or any of those people.
Because here's the key difference between Don and Ted. Ted is not insecure.
Right.
Ted is very secure in himself. It's why Peggy finds him so attractive.
Yeah.
Exactly, and which is so interesting because Draper seems to be at face value the epitome of a secure together cat, and we all know that he's really like a mess.
Yeah.
Whereas Cha seems a little bit like kind of a little nerdy guy, but he's completely
It's the difference.
okay with himself.
It's the difference between, as Peggy put it last episode, strength and power in the form of Ted versus the illusion of power in Don.
Right.
Don expends so much energy to maintain the illusion of his absolute control.
Sure.
You've got Ted talking to Gleason in the hospital about I can never figure out if he's putting it on or not. What's Don like? Oh, he's so mysterious.
Right, so mysterious.
He won't talk
it's
for
like,
long periods.
Will Ted be cracked? You know,
Yeah.
because he's got that secure. I love how he's nerdy and secure at the same time.
Well, in that he's not ashamed. Like really, I mean, he's secure, but he's putting it out there a little bit too. I mean, he's going to be the head of a partner in a gigantic ad firm by being sort of a wallflower. So in the conference room, he's throwing it out there a little bit of the who's plane? We can fly my plane. Do you guys have a plane?
You don't have a plane?
And just the reactions, the Draper
No, it was
reactions in that
family.
room were priceless. Just
Yeah.
Draper's reaction to everything Cha did was like, who is this guy?
Joan was like, "Oh, and Ted." And Ted.
Yeah, exactly, of course.
Yeah.
But so Draper's reactions were absolutely like, wait a minute, it was a very subtle like, I thought I was the guy. This guy is not the guy.
Well, that's the thing. He didn't entirely think through his decision to make this merger happen. He did it while he was drunk.
This guy has been his rival since season 4, and that was a fierce rivalry in the middle of season 4.
But I think it speaks a little bit of the hubris of Don Draper to think like, okay, well, yeah, all across the board, like we'll do the merger. Like Peggy will come over, Cha will come over. I'll still be Draper. Well, how bad can it be when he got there and he sees Cha is actually a brilliant guy?
He's not
going to
just sit there
dropping groovies and flying planes around. You know,
Well, that's
dropping
the difference.
groovies and flying planes.
that's exactly.
I want that on a T-shirt. Ted Shaw, dropping groovies and flying planes.
So
all right.
So then we see. So then we have the first actual test of their
The margarine?
Don. Well, yeah, so the Don versus Cha when Cha calls a creative meeting. He calls that creative meeting and Don does his Don Draper. Just plain old regular Don Draper shit. I'm gonna drop out of the office. I'm gonna go, do my thing. I'll breeze in when I want. Nothing's happening without me. What's gonna happen here? I'm Don Draper. He comes back and the meeting's over and Cha is like, no. That was a very, very cool, interesting power play.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to expect from that, but then I really genuinely thought that Don was going to come in and extend the olive branch. I thought,
He did.
Yeah.
Well,
It backfired.
He did, but it was a put on.
It was very much. Remember, I can't remember if it's season 1 or 2 where he gets in that thing
One with Roger.
And
one.
the oysters in the beginning. Yeah, that was this
Staircase.
Yeah, that was this. It's an old trick in the old Don Draper.
Just
bag of
outdrink
tricks,
your
yeah.
opponent. He
Exactly.
can always do that,
Just
apparently.
whip out his alcoholism and
Right.
see if his is as big as his.
Well, speaking of the whipping out, that's exactly what was going on at the conference table.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone at the conference table was just like, okay, here we are, gentlemen. let's measure what's
Ted
what.
can fly a plane.
Ted can fly a plane. But he can't drink. And after he was in this
Yeah.
big position of power with all the creatives and being a source of strength, he
Right.
comes back out and he is just a mess.
Right.
And even Peggy was so pissed at Don for doing, because she knew exactly what he did, that she went to his office and she took him to task.
And there's an interesting dynamic there which I didn't quite pick up on in the moment was, Peggy was in one hand sort of really calling Don out because she's the only guy who understands Don and can call him out, call him on his shit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, she's kind of sticking up for her man Cha.
Yeah.
She's like, don't do that to my guy. She
is hung
He's a
up.
really good man. He's not like
You're not gonna Don Draper
You're
him.
gonna Draper him out. So I really love that. But I did in the one line I wrote down from the conference room was after the back and forth about the chair and who's gonna sit where, and then he gets up and he gives the chair to the secretary. Sterling has a great line of now that we've dispensed with the gallantries, let's get
That was Slattery. That was our last
Slattery.
Slattery. Like, all right, I'm gonna do my Sterlingism. All right, now we'll do the directing the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got a lot. Slattery did a great job of getting just enough Sterling in there, and then like backing.
I feel like Cha is poised to stick it out, though. Gleason tells him just give him the early rounds because he'll get tired. Meaning, I think Gleason and Cha.
Rope-a-dope, huh?
Gleason and Cha obviously go way back, and he would know him well enough to know that's a strong suit of Cha's. By the end of the episode, Don says, well, yeah, you're still the guy who flew the plane over here. And he's like, I guess that is true.
I guess I am.
Check out my aviator.
That whole scene was just magic. It was like it was a sitcom scene, basically. It was so funny.
The season finale of Seinfeld where they're in the plane and it's like...
Well, it was the great because
around.
Cha was terrified himself. The look on Cha's face was just as terrified as Draper, and Cha's like, have you done this often? And Cha's terrified.
Not now.
Right, exactly. But when he did make it, when he did get through, it was the leaning back on the glasses. He's like, there you go, I told you.
Walk in, act like you own half the
Exactly.
place, because you do.
Exactly.
He's going to stick it out.
I just want to say one thing about the merger and our song choice at the very end.
Sure.
Because I do think it's so groovy now that all the people are getting together.
Groovy, man.
Getting together.
Haunting.
I love it. Yeah.
Haunting in that moment.
Right across the Bobby Kennedy assassinations, which was, like they do a lot of, I really love the way they handled this because, Mad Men sometimes becomes, or at least, and I would say Mad Men does this, but Mad Men fans are guilty of sort of anticipating, looking on the calendar and being like,
this is coming
when
up.
comes the Bobby Kennedy episode, shit's gonna happen in the Bobby Kennedy episode.
And I'm so happy that they didn't give it an episode.
Yes, exactly.
Once it happened with JFK in the third season, then it was like a thing you were looking out for.
And then the MLK episode.
They put things on the sidelines a
Right.
little bit with it. You could see the look on Don's face, like you immediately thought of when you saw Don in the third season when JFK was assassinated, and he had this look on his face in this episode, like, I'm not gonna do this again.
Right.
Like Megan was fixed on the television, and Don was getting ready for.
Well, I thought Don was just oddly, even through all the Vietnam stuff, all the Ted Offensive stuff early on, Don was oddly tuned out. He's all seemed to be like, the 60s is a very tumultuous time. This is kind of the thing of why he's not jumping up on the desk and saying groovy. He's still Don Draper from 1963, with the Brooks Brothers 50s. Suit and the pocket square and doing the whole 1960. Whereas, and where all this social change is happening around him, and it's not affecting who Don Draper is. Don Draper is still Don Draper. So whether or not, like, other people are getting affected by, the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. These are things that are affecting people to their core, and also and the music and the rock and roll and the tune and the drugs. And Draper's just
turning the Beatles album off right before the song's over.
Exactly.
But it is affecting him. It is affecting him because you look at his behavior with Sylvia in the episode, and I know that we'll get more into that.
Yeah, we're close.
All right,
we're close.
All right, well, go ahead. We're close enough. All right, then I'm gonna get into it. He brings her to this hotel room. He tells her to get a hotel room. He wasn't gonna see her, and then she says, "I need you." The exact quote I believe it was, "I need you, and nothing else will do."
Yeah.
And nothing else will do. And he's like, his need to be needed and to be important, infallible, unimpeachable, to be Don Draper versus Dick Whitman.
Right.
To be the power that he projects is so vital that he turns her into this lowest thing of just like, you only exist for my pleasure and you're going to stay here. and you're not going to ask questions, and you're not going to leave, and you're not going to answer that phone till I show up.
I was really shocked.
Couldn't believe how much he kept going.
Well, yeah, I didn't. This is the thing that perplexes me about the Draper. Well, just about their treatment of Draper. Like, I don't know if this is Weiner. I feel like that Weiner and the gang are playing this weird trick on the audience, where it's like, how much can we allow the viewers to still want to root for Draper? How deplorable can we make this guy and still make him like, that's just Draper being Draper? Draper,
yeah, they're really pushing it now.
It's like Draper really, Draper knows what he's doing with the ladies.
Yeah. When he
Drapered it. I was taught,
Yeah.
He's
50 Shades of Draper.
Draper out Draper Don Draper.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, it's like, this guy, I can't tell if like that's the coolest thing I ever saw or the most deplorable thing I've ever saw.
We've almost always said that is the coolest thing I've ever saw when he does is like, think of any quippy line from almost the entire show where he does that. But today it was over the line.
Yeah.
We were questioning, what did he just do? That's bad.
And I didn't see it coming, because where did it come from? Because there's a moment in the elevator where when he's overhearing the argument,
when he's overhearing,
and he had a look in his face like, oh shit, is she gonna say, well, I was done? Like, the way I read it was like,
That's not even how I read it.
I thought it was just the pain of listening to
maybe
Arnie lose everything.
I think it was just sort of like, all right, I'm good. And then
it was like a panic of like, oh God, don't let him see that.
Right, I don't want to see. And then I think that moment I thought, well, how's he gonna handle this? But he's like, it was more like, I got her now. And then he wanted to.
That's not what it was.
That's not what I got. I got the pain of listening to Arnie lose his thing, because he has felt. We've never seen him feel bad about being unfaithful before, but he likes Arnie. He respects the hell out of
Very
Arnie.
True. Yeah.
And so he's
guilty. He played a role in it.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's his fault.
Wow.
So
you think that his reaction in the elevator is more like, oh, poor Arnie.
And he
didn't want to look at Arnie in that moment. That was the last thing he could do.
It's the same reason that he didn't want to be with Sylvia. He wasn't intending to go over there. Not only did he have so much going on at the office, I think also he was just kind of like, that's probably, based on what I witnessed, that's probably not a good idea. And then it's being needed, not desired, but needed in a time where he's being squeezed out at this office. And
felt so vulnerable after overhearing that conversation in the elevator.
Again, it's a classic, this is the one thing that I can control.
Exactly.
Obviously,
he couldn't.
After what happened in the conference room with Cha, like I said, dropping the groovies in the planes, and after what happened with Peggy, him sort of saying, him missing the meeting with Cha, and Cha, that happened. He's like, I can control this.
And then he couldn't, and it broke his heart.
Man, have we seen him that broken before?
I think we may have.
Yeah, well, when Peggy left last season.
Yeah.
But he definitely was.
I've never heard him say please the entire time I've been watching the show.
Please. That was like a very drastic 180, like, turn the Batmobile around 180.
It's like John Hamm finally got to access this entire other acting skill there was never any need for with Draper,
because
Draper never goes there.
Drapered out like
just
in a big way.
Hangdog patheticness.
And then by the end he was
I was like droopy dog.
And it was
Don Droopy.
Don Droopy.
And it really was kind of sad.
Don
Drooper.
It was really sort of sad to see that whole thing sort of crumble. You're so proud of yourself.
I know. I'm so proud. I'm so proud.
It's to see him crumble the way John Hamm played that in that moment. He's like, "What are you doing? No, he's back into his 50 Shades of Grey mode."
And she knew. She was like, "Oh, don't keep going.
Yeah,
I'm done. I'm very done."
He's like, "Well, what do you mean? Put your clothes back." No, this is over.
So no, you had it. You went too far.
Right. He's like, "What, over?" And then it was like, "Come on, Don."
Just own it. Do you Don? Like, I don't care. It'll shock you how much this never happened. Move on.
Folded. Well, it's very layers of folding. And I really thought in the moment that this was sort of like a reverse power play on her part. I thought she would kind of turn around to the camera, take to the camera, and do a little smile. I thought that'd be like, oh, she's got him now. The tables have turned. But no, she's actually right. She's like, this is over. Like, I have a husband, you have a wife. This was all fun.
She had a dream. She had a premonition and a dream.
Well, and
You can't mess with that.
Well, the thing about this is like, you know, zooming out from that whole, you know, what the events in room 503, zooming out from that whole situation, it's
Which
like
is a fan fiction story. We're writing about this.
where did Don think this was going to go exactly? It's almost like, you know, you're going to keep her holed up in room 503 forever.
I'll
this
tell
is a
you.
perfect example of where he's at. It's in the fantasy world that he's living in, because she's like enjoying the fantasy. What happened day one, she's like she loved the whole thing. That was a great thing for her. Then by day two, she's like, dude, what are we doing?
Would you say that he was not a man with a plan?
Oh,
Title of the episode.
Man with a plan.
I was just like that's it. That's it.
Walk out then. Walk out, Salem.
We'll get to that. We'll get to who the man with the plan is.
All right.
But yeah, so that was
He had no plan. He was the man without a plan. He was the opposite.
So that was the Don. So we saw Don completely go his arc from a lot of change, how he handled all of those changes, how he seemed to gain that control, lose that control, can maybe regain some control in the office, but lose it again with Sylvia.
Yes.
Like lost control in the office, gained it with Sylvia, lost control with Sylvia, regained it at the office.
Yeah.
And then, you know, felt his loss of control yet again when Bobby Kennedy is shot.
Yeah.
It's yet another thing that's like the world is changing, the world is dark, and Don Draper has no place in it.
Yeah, he sits staring
He's
into
the 50s
space.
man.
He's the 50s, and that, you know, and just one last thing about this, about these Matthew Weiner. Matthew Weiner.
I've always said Weiner.
It's Weiner. It's definitely
Weiner.
Weiner. These Matthew Weiner sort of event episodes where, like, I love, again, we love why they made this sort of a throwaway episode, but they've always used these event episodes to sort of to reflect not what's happening in the times, but to sort of, like, one of my colleagues at Grantline mentioned this, I think it was Greenwald, mentioned that, like, it's always a good mirror to show how the characters react. So the MLK episode is like, you got to see the real Pete. You got to see, it's a good character study on how all these people, who these people are based on the events that happen. So we love those episodes, but this was the ultimate of that for me, because, you know, here we have Bobby Kennedy being shot, and the only two people we see reacting to it are Pete's mom and Pete being asleep.
That was all we needed to see. When we saw JFK get assassinated, we needed to see the entire Sterling's daughter's wedding. We needed to see everybody. We don't care about the events themselves. We care about seeing them in real time, because we've learned about them in history class, and they're notes on a page. But to see them actually affecting real people's lives, it's nothing without the characters reacting to it.
Sure. So that was I don't know. I thought that was well handled, well acted.
Yes.
Bravo again,
Haunting.
Mad Men.
I have a question. In all of our fun times at SCDGC.
Well, will they keep the P? Will they keep the P?
I don't know. He is dead.
I know.
Yeah. Where was Dawn? We heard of her. We heard her. You know, Dawn is a very good secretary off screen.
Right. If Joe Flippo were here, he'd say something like, "Well, she probably only signed on for X amount of episodes. They're not going to have her the whole season." Blah 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 blah.
No.
Boo,
but we've got you here to embody yourself and Joe Flippo.
Yes.
So now we know,
I'm Joe Flippo. No, that where the F is Don? Like you're absolutely right, because it's really I feel a little manipulated slightly, and I've read this a lot. People, I'm not the first person to bring this up, but you know, they introduced Dawn in the episode that preceded the flood.
Right.
They introduced Dawn and her homegirls at the talking about. You know,
she's at that diner.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, oh, we got some black folks, and they're talking some stuff, and da-da-da. But then it just sort of felt like, did they only do that in order to be able to set up a reaction for the flood episode? And if so, I'm fine, because the show isn't about, you know, the black folks. It's really about these people, you know, the Mad Men, which is fine. But then where does she go?
Yeah, well, they showed her empty desk twice during this episode.
All right.
Like it's just she is just not there.
Somebody tell me where Don is, but I do know where one person is. I do know where Bob Benson is.
I know where Bob Benson is.
It's 9 o'clock. Do you know where Bob Benson is?
I do.
Benson watch.
Negative K, nothing further. Just see the cabbie in the corner.
It is time for tonight's A Benson Watch.
That's right. So listen, Benson had a lot to do this episode.
Benson had a lot to do.
Before you rip my man Bob Benson apart and tell me what a snake on the grass he is, I just want to say that I thought Benson was and is and will be a stand-up guy.
Yeah.
I think that I'm really liking Bob Benson. I like the cut of his jib in this episode. So go ahead, rip him apart. Why is he a snake on the grass?
I'm gonna jump in with you on that.
I'll tell you why. You know what every great villain needs?
What's that?
He needs you to like him first. He needs you to be drawn into his web. You think he's such a great guy, so that when he turns, you did not see it coming.
Sure.
And you hate him all the more.
Yes.
Here's the thing. All right, so Bob, who has been angling for advancement at this place, since he was introduced.
Sure.
He is Pete Campbell, the next generation.
Sure.
Okay. He's been trying to move forward. He's very, very nice about it. Very insistent, but very nice.
Yes.
But he's clever. When he opened Joan's office door, he heard that she said, just a minute.
He thought she said, come
That's
in.
what he said. That's what he said.
You don't want to believe him?
I don't want to believe him because he's a snake in the grass.
All right.
And you know what?
I don't think there's enough evidence to support that.
He handled it really nicely. He handled it. He handled Joan's whole situation with aplomb. He got her out of the office. He made it look like he was bugging her the whole way, and that's why she was leaving. That was great.
It was a nice move. It was a self-aware move.
He helped her get, care at the hospital, and he brought a football for her son. But I tell you what, he knows that he's planting a seed in her mother's head that she's going to pass on to Joan.
Does he now?
Yes, and he's going to get in bed with the He's going to get in bed with the partner. He knew that his job was on the chopping block, and he made sure that he stayed. He clung to the ship as it left shore, and he made sure. I'm telling you, he is going to get.
And it saved his job. I mean,
he is going to get in Joan Harris's bed, and then he is going to slaughter. Not actually, but he's just going to make sure that he winds up on that board of partners.
All right, I'll let you have all of that. I'm going to
Snake.
Very much disagree.
He is the man with a plan.
He was.
Go on, Alex.
Well, I want to believe when Joan's mom is like, not every good deed has to be part of a plan.
Yes.
Which is how we get into the title
Matthew
episode.
Lieberman.
And I want to believe it. The only reason I'm going to agree that you're probably going to be right, that he is going to be a villain, is just because of the show we are watching him on. It has nothing to do with Bob Benson himself, out of context, but in the context of Mad Men, and we know things that have to happen and things have to change. Then I can see that. What I want to know is, if you're calling him out as the villain, well, we won't know when he's going to change. Who's the hero that's either going to strike him down or that he's going to defeat?
We have to hope that it's Don Draper, but we can't be sure.
But they're not. But Draper's creative. Draper's playing with Shaw.
Speculation. What if
is this a prediction?
Yeah. What if stopping Bob Benson is Pete Campbell's saving
redemption?
Grace?
We would love to see that.
I'm way off. I just think that I'm going to
go. The passion of the Pete Campbell.
We're going to get into these catches of the week, but I just want to just go on record by saying I think Bob Benson is a stand-up guy. I think this is his play. Yeah. I think that he genuinely cares about old Joni. I think that we may see something happen. And Joni did do a very Joan move in saving him at the end. One stroke of the pen, very cool. Yes, we should fire Bob Benson, but
I think
very cool.
She was very cool.
He just wanted to be nice. I think when he was schmoozing up to her this episode, I don't think it had anything to do with romantic intentions, power play or not. I think it had everything. He certainly was aware of about his job, but just being nice, I think, is
I did like the very Bob Benson move, him leaving his coat on the chair so no one knew he was gone.
Exactly. Snake. Right.
So let's jump into these catches of the week.
That's just fun, I think.
Catches of the week there, Phil. What do we got from our man Mike August? What's he got for us?
All right, well, let me preface this. I'm not caught up.
Uh-oh.
So I'm only reading what the page says rather than, being an actor and actually giving the words life.
Okay.
Actor. All
right. So the a-hole in Houston that Dr. Rosen, and of course we're talking about immediate release.
Right.
Last week's episode.
So this is from superfan Mike August. The a-hole in Houston that Dr. Rosen is referring to is Denton Cooley, who was a leader in developing heart surgery and transplants at the time. His team of associates performed the first heart transplant in the U.S. on May 3rd, 1968 at St. Luke's Hospital in Houston.
Oh.
And you learn about this in history class maybe as a footnote, but you care about it here because of the way it affects Arnie. Way to go, Mad Men.
That's right.
Way to go, Mike August.
Way to go, Mike August.
Way to go, Mike
Superfan
August.
Mike August.
The referenced top secret car from Chevy was the Vega, but it ended up being nothing but trouble for the company, namely due to faulty axles and throttle-related issues. Chevy's Corvette released that same year.
Corvette.
See, again, I'm not giving the words life.
Oh, my gosh.
Faulty axes and throttle-related issues. That sounds like Joe Sanfelippo in high school.
But,
Whoa.
but it's going to be
Zing.
interesting. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not the car, basically, being dead on arrival in the market, and how that is going to affect SCDP GC.
It may not. Well, we'll see. That's
it may.
From a reputation standpoint, not from a billing standpoint.
The merger, it may impact the security of the merger.
Yeah.
What else does Mike August got?
All right. Well, the last catch of the week, Mike August liked the fact that Don called Ted Lieutenant in an episode displaying corporate warfare.
Oh. Lieutenant. Mike August, Superfan Mike August, is a guy who helps us out with these catches of the week. These episodes are very, very dense. The first act of this was very, very dense, so I'm sure he'll help us unpack some of this next week. Takes him a week. He looks through, gives us the catches. The following week, we enjoy them. Thank you, Superfan Mike August.
Very enjoyable.
Thank you, Mike August.
Now, what happened to me?
What
do you mean? What happened to you?
Yeah, you're fine.
Oh, I can hear myself. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I can.
Joseph, don't be afraid.
I'm sorry. I can't hear myself, but I can hear you guys.
Aw.
Let's jump into predictions.
All right.
Can you hear that?
Now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Any non-Bob Benson related predictions, Matt Lieberman?
Nope. All of my predictions are Bob Benson related.
All right.
No, I think we're going to see Ted, this Ted, Don, Peggy dynamic continue to unpack. I'm so happy that all this development happened early enough in the season that the season is ultimately going to be about this merger and how it affects everyone involved. I'm glad that Ted is a bigger character now. Because I'm really curious about him.
He's a groovy guy.
Yeah, he's a groovy guy, and I hope we see him more.
Groovy plane flyer.
I hope we see him more outside the office.
Sure. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'd be curious.
Alex?
I think we have to see Pete Campbell and Bob Benson come to a head. You mentioned, Matt, that they're friends because we saw them go to the whorehouse together.
Yes.
But I believe that's because nobody else wanted to go with Pete because Pete wanted to celebrate.
Well, no, he also said, Bob, come in here when they were celebrating. He was like, Bob, come in here for a drink. I think he even used the word buddy.
Yeah, but he's being Pete and Pete 2.0. They say buddy. Anyway, I believe that's going to come to a head. I believe Don's either going to have to learn how to get along with Chaw or more friction. Too much friction.
All right. Well, my prediction is more. It's kind of obvious. I think this effect with the Sylvia affair is going to have a negative effect on Don that will carry over into the office. And he may be a little off his game, and Chaw will be there to pick up the pieces. Chaw and Peggy will be there to pick up the creative pieces. So we'll see how that works out.
Chaw Olsen ad agency.
We'll see. Matthew Lieberman, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Matt Lieberman. That's MattLieberman. You can also find me here on AfterBuzz TV on the Defiance After Show and the Doctor Who After Show. We have the Star of Defiance on our show this week, Grant Bowler, which is really exciting. And if you live in Los Angeles and you love live comedy, I perform the first Sunday of every month at IO West on Hollywood Boulevard as a member of DJ Fawcett. Yes.
Where can we find you, sir?
You can find me on Twitter at @TheAlexSalem, SALEM.
Great. And you can find me, Joe Braswell, at Joe K. Braswell on Twitter. You can also find me here doing Bates Motel and now Hannibal.
Nice.
As well. So we're starting that up. And also on Grantland.com, some nice pieces coming out for them. That's it for us. Thanks for joining us every week, and we'll see you next week.
And next week, in the first 5 minutes, we will have a major announcement.
Whoa!
That's what we call a tease.
Yes.
Thank you. See you next week.
From Bing.com, executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.